We have more training camp matchups to speak about. Today, it's off-ball linebacker, safety, and the curious case of Anton Harrison. We'll do it today on Locked On Jaguar.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast, a team that I've covered for over 2 decades here in a few different ways, terrestrial radio, podcasting, all sort of different ways that I've covered this team. And I like to give you all the big stories from the team as we are in off-season mode right now, heading into training camp. And one of the things that we're going to continue to discuss is the competition that is built up towards training camp, and we'll do that here today on an episode that is wherever you find your podcast. Make sure you tap in, whether you watch or listen. We will be there. Shout out to the everydayers who join us, and if you're new here, we'll make you an everydayer too. Hopefully we can do that. We're going to end the show talking about Anton Harrison, and it's going to be me using reasoning again to explain why I think he may have been in a little bit of trouble to start. And he might be one of those dudes, even though offensive linemen don't grow on trees, he might be one of those dudes that has some value for movement. Safety is something that we need to discuss. It's a very important position. And then we will make sure we get to the beginning, which is the off-ball linebacker. Let's start there. We all know that Foyola Bakan is the leader of the defense. This is not about Foyola Bakan. It's not. Even though he has the right mentality, the mentality, he was at OTAs it was OTAs where he spoke to us, and he said that he knows they're trying to replace him. He said that's just what the league is. This is after him getting 2 big money contracts. He's on his second one right now, his extension with the Jaguars. But even he understands reality, the reality that at some point he lived as a player who came out of nowhere. And while there's nothing like a guy who came out of nowhere to end up being a surefire starter and a guy that makes enough money to take care of himself for the rest of his life, that's a good enough story. But the other story is, the other part of it is, he continues to act and play and prepare as if he's still hungry and hasn't made it. And that's a credit to him. So I wanted to make sure that we give him his flowers. He is in no danger of not being exactly what we think he is for the next couple of years. The Jaguars used a 4th-round pick on Jack Kaiser, a kid out of Notre Dame with a large body of work. And that pick seems like it had Anthony Campanile written all over it, but I won't speculate on that. But he's going to make the team. Not only is he going to make the team, he looks the part, right? We've seen him as a rookie out there running around. Now, granted, they have not put on pads yet, so all of this has to be ironed out through physical contact, because we all know that that's what football is. But there's some other guys, and I want to mention them. Devin Lloyd, Chad Muma, and Ventrell Miller. Now, there's no scenario where I don't think the Jaguars keep – there isn't a scenario where I think they keep less than 5 linebackers, right? The key is, though, is sometimes in their structure and the way that they, the way they want to configure their team, you may have to get a person that's a dual player. So one of those linebacker spots, or maybe even 2 of them, more likely one of them, will go to 2 people I featured yesterday, and that's Yasir Abdullah and Jalen McLeod. And the reason why is because they offer a different type of linebacker, sort of a Sam linebacker in a base 4-3, and they can play in space, guard tight ends. And then the other thing is they can rush the passer in what you call sub formation. So I think because they are tweeners, that when you look at the total linebacker room, and I brought them up yesterday, and I made a point to, and Gardeck is in this too. I made a point to mention Gardeck was banged up yet on a baseball cap, but they had Jalen McLeod and Yasir Abdullah working on the side. Like, those 2 guys are kind of like aligned in the form of they're very, very similar, and that they have room for a person like that on the roster, because if they didn't, they wouldn't have them. They inherited Abdullah, but they drafted McLeod, who's pretty much the same type of player. They're just football players. They don't really have a position. I think sometimes when you say positionless, people mean that means you can play everything. No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is you're a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but you're really good. And there's always room for people like that to be able to make plays in certain spots and in certain scenarios in the game. But for me, Devin Lloyd is making the team, obviously. He was, lining up alongside Foyola Bakan. I think they want to see what he was going to do, how he was going to respond to the offseason program. He did not have his fifth-year option picked up. And Liam Cohen praised him. What does that mean? Don't know. But he was praised. I haven't heard a lot from Chad Muma. I saw someone write because I didn't read it, but I saw an article where someone says that he's been nondescript basically, and he looked like he might get cut or whatever with Chad Muma. I didn't read too much into it, and I don't want to take away from it because I don't want to in any way misrepresent whoever wrote that said. But I tell you what, he's been pretty quiet and nondescript his entire time here in Jacksonville, and this is the last year of his contract, and if he was going to do anything, it would have to be now. Ventrell Miller, on the other hand, had a real good year last year. His first year, he was able to stay healthy. He has his physical limitations, but he plays fast. He plays instinctive. I don't think Ventrell Miller's in that much danger either, to be honest with you, unless they have a desire to have a guy with more physical traits than someone who's 6'1", 225, or 228, 230, whatever Ventrell is. This is going to be an interesting thing to watch. I think the difference is going to be who steps up and makes themselves uncuttable. Who will provide of those linebackers, which one of them or two of them will make themselves uncuttable for this upcoming season? The one that has the chance of actually getting money is Devin Lloyd, who, even though he didn't get a contract extension. If Devin Lloyd plays well the first 6-7 weeks of the year, why would the Jaguars not decide, hey, man, I know we didn't give you your option, but can we work something out with you and keep you, unless he just wants to tap into free agency? But it's going to be interesting to me. Chad Muma might be in a little bit of trouble. He might be in a little bit of trouble. I do believe that this regime is going to give everyone a chance and an opportunity to make the team. But the battle at linebacker is definitely one to watch. I'll go through some of these other backers, some people that were brought in by the Jacksonville Jaguars this offseason, just in case, we all don't know every name on the roster. I had a numerical roster here somewhere. So there's 9 guys on the roster. You got the starters of Foy, Devin, and Ventrell Miller. They list here projected, and this is Justin Lewis from Jacksonville.com. Reserves: Chad Muma, Yasir Abdullah, Jack Kaiser, Branson Combs, Jalen McLeod, and Dennis Gardeck. See, the 3 guys I remember that play those tweener positions. They're listed with the linebackers because of the, what do you want to call it? The multiple aspect of that position. Like I said, Lewis said that Lloyd didn't get his 5th-year option picked up. However, he was praised by Cohen during minicamp. Foyola Bakan is still in the middle of the defense. The leader, Miller, will likely see a lot of the field after his strong second season. Gardeck will be a change of pace backer with the ability to get after the quarterback. Abdullah and McLeod will be brought along as the same. So there's the competition for that. Speaking about Yasir Abdullah and McLeod yesterday and mentioning Gardeck, we can mention him again here with the linebackers. Do they decide to keep more than one of those guys for special teams and as some depth for pass rush in subsets, or do they decide we got enough there that we're not got Dewan Smoot? Of course, they went out and added defensive end from Miami, Emmanuel Ogba, and they want those guys to play. They want them to play. We're going to take a look at safety. The safety position has some familiar names and maybe some not familiar names to talk about. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. Man, ever wish your money felt easier? Managing it has to feel easier, right? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. The thing that surprised me most, and when I noticed it, is how much money I was actually wasting by not having Monarch Money. One thing about me, I don't like wasting my hard-earned money, and you shouldn't either. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, Tony Wiggins rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars, where it is your team every day. Glad to have you with us here today. We've had a little bit of a 2-day series here talking about training camp battles to watch. And, you kind of know who the starters are, right? And there may be a situation or two or scenario or three where we get into these starter battles, right? Especially in segment 3 along the offensive line and maybe at some other positions where things aren't etched in stone. One of those positions where you really don't know is safety. And right now, for the sake of this discussion, I'm using the article on Jacksonville.com by Julian Lewis. What he has as the projected depth chart. The Jaguars have not updated their depth chart since before the draft and start of free agency, since the 5th of January on their actual website, and I understand that. But the starters are listed as Eric Murray, who was signed as a free agent from the Houston Texans, along with Andrew Wingard. The reserves is Darnell Savage, who was signed last year as a free agent, and I think makes the most money in that whole group. Antonio Johnson, in his 3rd year out of Texas A&M. Daniel Thomas, special teams whiz. And here's where it gets interesting. You new people, Caleb Ransaw and Rayon Lane III, they were draft picks, and Cameron Simon Craig is here also. So this is the observation from Julian Lewis. As we said in our last depth chart prediction after the NFL draft, it wouldn't be a surprise to see Caleb Ransaw among the starters when the regular season begins. Very interesting he says that, because I absolutely agree with it. The organization is high on the rookie defensive back as he makes the transition from nickel corner to safety. It's hard to gauge what the team thinks of Darnell Savage. He's garnered praise from the coaching staff, but he spent time with multiple units during the offseason. It's minicamp, so maybe they're trying to figure it all out. And paraphrasing that part, if the starters in week 1 are Wingard and Murray, it wouldn't be shocking. But if Savage was still a starter by then, that wouldn't be a surprise either. Safety is quietly one of the biggest question marks going into the preseason training camp, going into training camp. That's by Julian Lewis, obviously. I agree with just about everything he said, if not all of it. I'm right there with him. They threw bodies at that position, right? Sorry, it's not Julian. It's Justin Lewis. I'm having that kind of day, y'all, so just bear with me here. But Justin Lewis, my buddy, I agree. I think he did a good job when he broke this down, because they threw bodies, right? They kept Dewey Wingard, which I think that's a good move. He's a good leader. He overachieves. He plays hard. The team seemingly, whenever Dewey was out, he was hurt. He came back and the team got better. Things improved. They were able to make plays and be around the ball and turn the ball over a little bit. So he's a mainstay, man, in my opinion. And he also can play special teams. Eric Murray, don't know a whole lot about Eric Murray other than that he has a certain characteristic where he doesn't quit on plays. Feet are always moving, very, very active. Was a little bit expendable when it came to Houston because they had to spend some money at other places on their team and then in their secondary, and they really needed to revamp the offensive line and get some wide receivers. So he became one of those really good players that kind of became expendable, and that happens sometimes. But I like him. I think he's a real good player. He's going to really, really upgrade the free safety spot. Darnell Savage is the one that's a little bit complex. It's complex when you think about it, because at one minute you think, okay, well, maybe he's their slot for the safety, because that's what they tried to do with him last year and it didn't work. and then he ended up going back to safety, and he was it's sort of in a little bit of a rotation with Dewey Wingard and of course Andre Cisco, who was here at the time. It's just real weird situation with him. And then you go and hire Anthony Campanile, who comes from Green Bay, which is where Savage came from, even though they did not cross paths. Well, Savage played for, you know, the defensive coordinator in Green Bay the year before, and that defensive coordinator had that's Anthony Campanile's guy. So I wonder, and coaches do this all the time. Coaches they'll pick up the phone and ask about somebody now, even if they're giving a guy a chance, you know. Or he's going down there. Hey man, what about this guy? They replaced him in Green Bay and replaced him with a better player who obviously made almost 2.5 times more money than Xavier McKinney. But it's going to be interesting to see how they feel about him and where they line him up, because I don't know what his actual cap number is without doing research on him having a tough enough time today as it is. There's an awful lot of money to be playing, but if he is still the dude that's making the most money, that's a lot of money, or close to a lot of money to be a dude that's not going to be playing, or maybe they have a package for him or a sub package or whatever. But I like the rookies. I like Ransaw, and of course, I mean we don't know where Mr. Lane is going to be, if he's just special teams. He's sort of a strong safety type. But I think Caleb Ransaw is a guy who might be their fastest DB outside of, well, Tyson Campbell's pretty fast too, and of course Travis Hunter, but he's very, very quick, big-legged, strong. I think he translates very well to safety as well as being in the slot. The one thing I can tell you about it is the Jaguars have a whole bunch of people, man, that can play back there. I think the floor of the room is a lot higher than it was, even if the ceiling didn't go up very much. I think they got rid of a lot of players that were still trying to find themselves, and now they have players now on the team that can really provide more answers for them. Antonio Johnson is another guy. We were all excited about him because he was projected to be like a 3rd round pick, and in the 5th round he was still there. And I know for a fact, a buddy of mine was at Texas A&M at the time, and he told me after the fact that Trent called out there and said, okay, what's going on with him? Why is he still on the board? Because he should be gone. The Jaguars folks reached out trying to figure out, okay, why is he still there? This is the year the Jaguars had a whole bunch of picks. They had a whole bunch of 5th and 6th round picks. And I do know that they were told, well, you better hurry up because the Giants, they picked like right behind you or close to right behind you, and the Giants are calling for him. They're calling. They just got off the phone and made it the same phone call. So the Jaguars took Antonio Johnson, and then he came into camp. He was a little more slender than we thought. You know, he was like 6'2.5", almost 6'3", but not even 200 pounds, about $197. And you saw it. He looked different. He looked like a wide receiver. He looked like one of those receivers you throw a bunch of fade patterns to. Well, he started out with a bang, and then all of a sudden it just seems like he couldn't get out of his own way, and that's why the development did not happen. Now, something about all of this that I'm going to assess real quick. You notice I'm mentioning a lot of 3rd, 4th, and 5th round picks that were picked by Trent Baalke that did not work. That does not mean that every pick that I believe will work, that is a 3rd or 4th round pick, will work just because James Gladstone is the one picking him. No, I'm not saying that. What I am telling you is this: they have to hit on a higher rate than they did or they have in the past, because that's where you get the meat of your roster from. If you look at the Chiefs, man, the Chiefs, one year they took like 3 DBs, one in the 2nd round, I think, one in the 3rd round, and then one in like the 4th or 5th round. And look at right now, and all 3 of those guys is in the top 5. 2 of them starts, one of them is an all-pro, and the other dude plays a whole bunch. He's like in their nickel formation. This is how you do it. And that is a Super Bowl winning team that's able to do that. And I think it's because they can match need and talent, scheme. It all matches up. They understand what people know how to do. And hopefully that's what, based on what we've heard from Tony Boselli, James Gladstone, and Liam Cohen, that's what they're going to do here and what they're going to try to do here in Jacksonville. I'm getting to Anton Harrison. This is going to take a little bit of projection from me based on things that I've heard. I'll tell you what's going on with the incumbent right tackle, who is in a little bit of a fight for his job, in my opinion. I'll tell you that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. Hey guys, I know you probably heard of Viagra and Cialis, and maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, Rougiet Ready is what you need to be looking for. Rougiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiet's 3-in-1 formula resolves under your tongue and kicks in fast, on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. Now, sometimes other options don't work, and Rougiet may be the answer. It has been for over 150,000 men already, and they have made the switch. Head to Rougiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That's Rougiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off, rather. RUGIET is what it is. All right. Individuals' results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiet website for full safety information. All right, third segment here on Locked On Jaguars. We're at your team every day. We've been going over training camp battles to watch the last couple of days. Talked off-ball linebacker, talked about the safety spot in segment 2. Now, Anton Harrison. Yeah, this is about competition. This is about a battle. But I think more than anything, it's a battle with one person battling himself. And the reason I say that is because they haven't hit yet. There hasn't been an assessment of anything other than whether they know what they're supposed to be doing based on the half-speed walkthroughs, whether they're catching on with how they're supposed to do things, whether they're showing up on time. I'll say it again, showing up on time for workouts, whether they are engaged in film study. I guess those are the things that can determine whether or not, as of this point, if anybody is making an impression on the coaching staff relative to the other players, because you can't measure whether they're pushing each other around physically enough because you haven't done that yet. They haven't been in full pads yet. That being said, I asked Sean Starrett about Walker Little. He smiled and said he's done a nice job. He's very, very impressive. Very, very impressive. His consistency. I asked him about Anton Harrison. Did smile. He kind of clutched his and he said he's done a nice job for us. The thing with him, I want to see him get a little bit more consistent. So where is that inconsistency coming from? Early, you saw Chuma Edoga, the offensive lineman, guard / tackle, who was brought in from the Dallas Cowboys. Chuma Edoga, former Southern Cal offensive lineman, who was brought in from the Cowboys. We all thought that it was brought in as a depth piece who would compete at both guard spots and possibly tackle if they needed him. But this we thought was a little bit of a floor raiser. I personally thought that he was going to challenge Ezra Cleveland at left guard. They're bigger fans of Ezra Cleveland than I am. All right. And I'm probably wrong about that. However, we've seen a lot of alternating. In fact, I almost would want to say I might have seen more of Chuma Edoga at right tackle than I have Anton Harrison. When you combine that with what was said, talking to people on the sideline, watching his body language, and I know that's a boo-boo sometimes when you get into doing that, but just talking to folks and listening to folks, you make it. It'll make you believe that the tape ain't why they're saying that about Anton. I'm getting a feeling that Anton might lack in the timeliness and the work ethic department. Not that he doesn't do it. I'm not saying that. But that maybe other people engage or do it or work harder or appear to be more in line with what the expectation is. And that doesn't mean that it won't happen. And it doesn't mean that he can't learn. It doesn't mean it's not over for him. But it does signal to me that it's, all right now, come on, let's go. It's all about competition. In order to stop being a loser, you can't just change other things and the players themselves not change themselves. There are players that, despite the fact that they're on a losing organization, still prepare themselves like a winner. I would suggest to Anton Harrison that that's what he does. I mean, it's cool to be on social media giving food takes and talking to people about stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we don't ever want to put the cart before the horse. We root for Anton Harrison. I thought Anton Harrison was going to be the left tackle for this team, to be honest. But in order to be the left tackle, you really have to be even that much more dependable. I'm wondering how dependable he is. Not how nice he is, not how talented he is, not whether he is a good kid, not saying he's a bad kid, not doing any of that. But he's a first-round pick. First-round picks in this league are like left-handers that can throw 97. Even if you don't have control in baseball, if you're a left-handed pitcher, they are going to give you every single chance to fail. And they're going to do it because you're rare, right? And I have often said that left tackles and right tackles and starting caliber players like that, you got to draft them or develop them. But more than likely, you ain't going to just find one walking around on the street in free agency. It might be, along with franchise quarterback, the two most difficult things to just find in free agency. Because wide receivers and corners, they hit free agency all the time when they're available, whether it's free agency or they just get cut because teams feel like, okay, you're turning 29 or 30. That's a lot of money. We can use the money elsewhere. Those guys are always out there. Pass rushers, all of that stuff. You know, when teams got to make moves, you ain't getting nobody to give you a tackle that is like in the top 10, 12 at his position or a quarterback. That's just not going to happen. So for them to be sending that message, and the message isn't, it might not be what I'm saying. It might not be get it together. It might be whether you get it together or not, we're going to put somebody out there, right tackle, that can play. Now, if you want it to be you, cool. If you don't, keep playing. And I think that's the way it is. Now, I'm going to remind you, I told you, this is just me. This is me using all of this information to kind of come up with this conclusion. And I'm not being overly hard on Anton, and I'm not saying that because I'm disappointed that the result of him being on the team isn't what I thought it was. I'm saying it because it's something for you to watch. And let's see if it plays out that way, or if Anton Harrison just all of a sudden turns into this hard worker who does everything that they want to do, and he becomes undeniable and he becomes uncuttable, and therefore you have to make sure he plays. These are the things that you need to watch as the Jacksonville Jaguars head into training camp. If you want to know more about the roster, peek in on Locked On NFL Scouting. Talk about the Jaguars. Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will tell you as much info about all of these players as prospects because they watched them in college and put grades on them. All right, make sure you check that out each and every day and make it your second listen, and come back to see me here on Locked On Jaguars. I'm Tony Wiggins. We'll see you next time here. Take care.